My name is Amelia Reed, 34, born and raised in Boston. If anyone asked about my biggest dream, I'd answer without hesitation. To open a restaurant that's uniquely mine, where every dish isn't just food but a memory, a love, a courage to live true to myself. That spring, the dream became reality. The Reed Kitchen officially opened its doors. I'd pictured the grand opening in hundreds of dreams. A room glowing with warm golden light, tables draped in crisp white linens, the clink of silverware like the prelude to a new life. I imagined my parents at the head table, eyes shining with pride, and Dylan, my younger brother, grinning with congratulations. We'd raise glasses together, and I'd cry tears of joy. But reality is often harsher than dreams. On opening night, I stood by the glass door, looking out at the street. Outside, Boston buzzed, car lights stretching endlessly. Inside, the dining room sparkled, the aroma of rosemary and roasted garlic mingling, my hand-picked playlist humming softly, songs Dad used to play on the radio driving me to school, tunes Mom hummed in the kitchen. I wanted the music to stir memories, to show my family I'd poured love into every detail. But the chairs stayed empty. The clock struck 7, when guests should have arrived. I'd prepared a bouquet for my parents' table. A grand opening sign stood proudly out front. Servers waited, poised, yet the door didn't budge. Not one family member showed. I checked my phone, hoping for a text. Running late, or at least sorry, stuck in traffic. Nothing. The screen was blank. Then, a familiar sound. Instagram stories. Curious, I opened it. There, under twinkling garden lights in a suburban backyard, was my family. Together, joyful, radiant. Dylan raised a glass, a massive cake behind him reading, "To bigger things." They cheered, laughed, clinked glasses, hugged. I froze. They'd chosen Dylan's promotion party, a backyard barbecue with cheap plastic chairs and lukewarm beer, over stepping into the dream I'd spent my life building. I took a deep breath, swallowing the bitterness, but every detail in the room stung. The handwritten menus I'd labored over, neatly stacked on the counter. The bouquet for Mom, still wrapped in cellophane. Dad's favorite lemon tart, cooling untouched in the display case. The playlist droned on, familiar songs echoing in the empty room like cruel mockery. Melodies that once made me believe family was my anchor now only reminded me I'd been abandoned in my own dream. By 10 o'clock, I faced the truth. No one was coming. With my staff, I began clearing tables, folding linens, wiping unrouged glasses. My hands trembled, not just from exhaustion but from the weight in my chest. As I wiped the last table, my phone lit up. A text from Dad. "We need to talk about the restaurant." No apology, no explanation, just a command. I gripped the phone, my heart twisting. I was used to Dad's tone. My efforts were always a passing hobby, as if he knew best. Mom stayed silent, always backing him. Dylan, the family's pride, was the excuse for constant comparisons. On the night I should have been celebrated, they turned away, and now they only remembered me when they saw something to exploit. I sat in the dim room, golden light casting shadows on empty tables, 1,000 questions swirling. Was I wrong to expect anything from them? Was I foolish to believe they'd ever see my worth? In that moment, I saw my life's greatest conflict. I loved my family, but they never valued my dreams. I was always outside their circle, no matter how hard I tried. Closing the restaurant that night, something shifted forever. I was done being the backup, done playing the good daughter who steps back for others to shine. I had to choose, endure their dismissal or set boundaries. You know, sometimes the people we love most hurt us deepest. I'm sure many have felt overlooked, undervalued, especially by family. If you've been there, share your story, because speaking out gives us strength to move forward. Maybe you think after that crushing opening night, I'd text my family, cry, beg them to come eat to console me. No, I spent 2 days reflecting, replaying the past and that fateful evening, the final straw. I remembered being called the dreamy daughter, Dad's smirks when I talked about opening a restaurant, Mom's comparisons. Dylan's in marketing, with a bright future. How will you manage just cooking? I'd swallowed it all, believing if I tried harder, they'd be proud. I was wrong. 3 days after the opening, I picked up my phone and typed, "From now on, the Reed Kitchen serves no family members. No reservations, no discounts, no exceptions." I hit send in the family group chat, where I'd always been the quiet one. Minutes later, my screen exploded with notifications. Mom called me, childishly upset. Dad sent a cold reply, "Talk like an adult." Dylan stayed silent until that afternoon. I was checking inventory when I heard a knock at the back door. There stood Dylan, holding a leftover cake box from his promotion party. He wore a suit, tie loose, exuding ease as if nothing was wrong. "Thought you'd want a slice," he said, lifting the box, the sweet scent of frosting wafting out. I stared, silent. Dylan was always like this, easygoing, optimistic, thoughtless. "Don't make a big deal," he said with an awkward smile. "Dad said it was just a soft launch, not the real grand opening, so we figured we'd come next time." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "Soft launch? You think 10 years of sweat and debt was a soft launch?" He faltered but recovered quickly. "Dad wants to help. He sees potential. He wants to invest, make it a big brand. He sent me to talk." My heart tightened. So this was why he came. Not to apologize, not to connect, but as Dad's ambassador. I took a deep breath, stepped onto the back porch, and pointed at the cake. "You know, Dylan, my whole life I've lived off scraps, leftover attention, trickle-down love, rare praise while you got standing ovations. Now you bring me leftover cake?" His eyes darkened. "Don't act superior. Dad's serious about investing. He said if you franchise, sell shares, the family will back you." "Back me?" I echoed, voice catching. "No, Dylan. They'll stand over me, pulling strings like I'm a puppet. This restaurant was built with my sweat, my loans, my nights working hotel shifts to afford a stove. I won't hand it over, especially not to people who didn't show up for my biggest day." He went quiet, then sighed, setting the cake on the steps. "You're turning this into a war. We're family." I looked into his eyes. "That's why it hurts so much. But it's time I set boundaries. No more discounts. No more being the fallback. No more silent sister. If you want to eat here, book a table like anyone else. If you want to support me, pay like anyone else. If not, this door stays closed." Dylan stepped back, as if seeing his sister's resolve for the first time. He said nothing, picked up the cake, shook his head, and left. The sweet scent lingered, but my heart tasted the bitterness of resolve. I shut the door and turned back inside. For the first time, my shoulders felt lighter. I'd done something bold. Faced them, said no. Once that boundary was set, it would never fall. You might think I was harsh, but if you've been overlooked, pushed behind others in your own family, you'll understand. At some point, you choose, stay a shadow or draw a line. I chose the latter. But that was just the start. I didn't know that small decision would ignite a bigger storm. In that storm, I'd face not just my family but public scrutiny and schemes I never imagined. If this story grips you, comment Y. If it's not compelling, comment N. Sometimes a small sign can change a life. For me, it was a piece of white paper, bold black letters, and a cold but firm decision. Reservations only, even for blood relatives. I hung that sign on the Reed Kitchen's door one quiet spring morning, Boston's cobblestone streets whispering with wind. My hands trembled as I fixed it to the frame, not from fear, but from knowing this was a public declaration. My family could no longer walk in and out of my life like a revolving door. I thought it was just self-protection. But by noon, a young customer snapped a photo of the sign and posted it on Twitter. "This is what boundaries look like." The post went viral, shared thousands of times in hours. That night, I opened my phone, stunned. Comments flooded in. "She's an icon. So many of us are undervalued by family and stay silent." "Boundaries taste better than betrayal." "Booking a table to support her." The next day, the restaurant was packed. Not because the food was suddenly better, it was the same recipes I'd perfected, but because people saw something familiar in me. Resistance against family injustice. But storms don't hit from one side. As the public rallied behind me, my family fought back. Within 3 days, the Reed Kitchen got nearly 21-star reviews on Yelp and Google. Cold food, rude service, Owner treats customers like strangers. I laughed bitterly. The words reeked of my family, people who'd never dined here beyond a sneaky glance. They didn't just abandon me on opening night, now they wanted to drag me down. I'll admit, that night I nearly broke. Alone in my tiny office behind the kitchen, I read each lying review, my chest heavy as stone. For a moment, I considered giving up, wondering if I should close to stop fighting. Then I remembered a young customer, a girl about 12, who came with her mom. As they left, she whispered, "I want to be a chef like you." Her sparkling eyes reminded me I couldn't quit. Not just for me, but for those who saw me as proof of courage. The next morning, I called my lawyer. We gathered evidence, screenshots, timestamps, suspicious patterns. I reached out to a reporter I knew from my hotel chef days, who'd once written that I cooked with heart. Hearing my story, she nodded firmly. "This isn't gossip, Amelia. It's truth that needs telling. Boston deserves to know who's trying to snuff your flame." 3 days later, the story hit the front page of the Boston Herald's food section. Phoenix of Boston, the woman who built a restaurant from family ashes. I'll never forget that moment. I was serving chowder when my staff's phones buzzed non-stop. Messages, calls, congratulations poured in. Customers flooded in, not just to eat, but to stand with me. One comment under the article made me cry at the counter. "She's not a lost sheep, she's a phoenix. I'm booking tables for a month to support her." I cried not from weakness, but because for the first time I felt seen. Not as Dylan's shadow, not as my parents' oddball, but as a person who mattered. My family? They went eerily quiet. But I knew their silence was just a facade. Dad texted, "You're shaming the family. Don't think the public will always back you." I read it and deleted it. For the first time, his words didn't shake me. I wasn't the daughter desperate to please anymore. I'd become the author of my story. If you relate to these struggles, check out my previous videos on this channel. Ever felt things were too calm, like instinct warning of a coming storm? I lived in that state for weeks after the Reed Kitchen became Boston's phenomenon. The restaurant was packed, media called me the Phoenix of Boston. But deep down, I knew my family hadn't given up. I was right. The biggest shock didn't come from Dad, Mom, or Dylan. It came from Natalie, the fiancée who seemed uninvolved in our wars. That afternoon, after the lunch rush, I heard a knock. Natalie stood at the back door, her usually flawless makeup betraying exhaustion, eyes shadowed from sleeplessness. "Amelia, can we talk privately?" Her voice was hoarse. I hesitated. Natalie was the ideal daughter-in-law my parents raved about. Beautiful, accomplished, gentle. We'd never been close. Her sudden appearance sparked suspicion. We sat at a window table, late sunlight streaming through. She fidgeted with her glass, took a deep breath and whispered, "There's something you need to know." She opened her phone to a chat group, Project Reset. My eyes locked on the screen. Messages from Dad, Mom, Dylan, Aunt Linda, Cousin Mark, plotting to bring me back to reality. Cut off her flour supplier so she can't bake. Post more OnStar reviews, switch IPs to avoid suspicion. Force her to sell the restaurant. Dad will own the company, Dylan will run it. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just neglect or harsh words. This was a calculated plot to destroy the dream I'd built with every ounce of my being. "You see?" Natalie said, voice trembling. At first, I thought they were just upset. But when the plans got crueler, I couldn't stay silent. I looked at her, fighting my anger. "Why tell me now, conscience or trouble with Dylan?" She gave a sad smile. "Both. I can't marry a man who thinks ruining his sister is normal. And I don't want to join a family like that." That night, Natalie exposed everything. She posted screenshots, even a recording of Dylan laughing. "A few months and she'll beg us." Her short caption blew up social media. "I can't marry someone or call their family mine when they plot to destroy another." The news spread, Reed family implicated in plot to sabotage Boston's Phoenix. I remember holding the next morning's paper, the bold headline both painful and freeing. Years of being hidden were now laid bare before the city. My phone exploded with messages, reporter calls. A TV producer offered a special. I declined. Their messages said enough. Dad called, furious. "Have you no shame? This is private family business." I replied calmly. No, Dad, this isn't private. It's a dirty scheme to ruin my life. Now everyone sees it. He went silent, then hung up. Mom texted, pleading, Amelia, don't tear the family apart. I did this to keep you safe. I sighed. Since when was crushing a daughter's dreams safe? Dylan stayed silent. Days later, I heard Natalie had called off their engagement. In a brief magazine interview, she said, I chose self-respect over a lavish wedding. Boston buzzed. People who doubted me sent apologies, booked tables. New customers came not just to eat, but to touch a real story, a woman standing up to her family. That empty opening night felt distant. Now, the Reed kitchen rang with laughter, clinking glasses, silverware on plates. To others, I was no longer the dreamy daughter. I was proof that truth, once exposed, could turn wounds into wings. Don't think I felt fully victorious. Deep down, pain lingered. Pain that my own family united to crush me, that some cracks would never heal. In the kitchen, looking at the bustling dining room, I wondered, what haven't they tried? Is Project Reset really over? Then, one night, an envelope slid under the door. Inside, a single note in trembling handwriting. Amelia, be careful. This is just the start. No signature, but the familiar script made my heart clench. Ever read a headline that tightens your chest? Not with joy, but a mix of pity and resentment? That was me one autumn morning in Boston, when the Boston Globe's front page screamed, Richard Reed loses everything, real estate project collapses, partners flee with funds. Richard Reed, the name I once carried like a burden. He wasn't just my father, but a man who boasted being a sharp investor. He insisted the Reed name be worn with pride. Now everyone knew he was penniless. In my small office behind the restaurant, my coffee went cold as I stared at the words. The man who called my dream a costly fantasy was now the center of a financial scandal. Memories flooded, him at the dinner table pointing at Dylan saying, This is the family's future. His dismissive frown when I shared my restaurant plans. He never believed in me, never thought I'd go far. Now I stood strong while he fell. I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I felt empty. He was still my father. Days later, after the evening shift, a staffer said someone was at the back door. My heart stopped. Richard Reed, the man who once strode in crisp suits, looked unrecognizable. Disheveled silver hair, worn coat, muddy shoes. His eyes were vacant, stripped of pride. Amelia! His voice was hoarse. I stood silent. 1,000 accusations and hurts begged to spill, but my lips stayed sealed. I knew if I let anger take over, everything I'd built would crumble. Instead, I went to the kitchen. I had staff pack a bag, crusty bread, hot beef soup, and the lemon tart he loved, the one I'd made for the opening he skipped. I wrote a note, each word trembling but clear. This time I'm helping, not for money. I don't want anyone to go hungry. I slipped it into the bag and handed it through the door, avoiding his eyes. He took it, hands shaking. For a moment I saw his eyes glisten. No words were spoken. He turned, his slow figure fading into Boston's chilly night. I leaned against the wall, breathing deeply to hold back tears. I didn't forgive him, not yet. But I couldn't let hate consume me. I chose compassion, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Days later, I heard he'd met with lawyers to negotiate debts. A friend said he sat silently in the meeting, nodding, no longer arguing or boasting. Maybe for the first time he had to face himself. Strangely, after giving him that food, I felt lighter. No need to prove anything anymore. I'd done the right thing, ended the cycle of resentment with a small act of humanity. Someone asked, Amelia, aren't you afraid he'll come back to hurt you? I smiled. After that fall, he had no strength to control anyone. All he had left was the memory of that meal, given not out of obligation, but mercy. Sometimes a lemon tart can force a man to face truth more than any financial ruin. My story isn't over. When one part of the past crumbles, another rises. And my family, especially Mom, hasn't backed down. One evening, as I locked the restaurant, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. They haven't stopped. Get ready. I gripped the phone, heart pounding. The next chapter of this fight was coming. Life has a funny way of surprising you. When you think it's over, it's often just the prelude to a new chapter. A year after that empty opening night, I stood in a small Boston square before a red brick building where a new sign gleamed gold. The Reed Kitchen. Second chapter. The building was once an abandoned wine cellar. I'd seen it on an early morning walk, sunlight softening its windows. In that moment, I knew I'd make it part of my next story. A space not just for cooking, but for rewriting memories with the scent of fresh bread, the rhythm of chopping knives, the smiles of those daring to start anew. Inside, I designed a rooftop garden, herbs infusing every dish. The rough brick walls stayed, reminding me that even cracks and scars can be beautiful. On the second location's opening day, no tables were empty. Dozens of reporters, friends, and loyal customers filled the space. Laughter, cheers, and warmth flooded the room. Food Chronicle chose me for their cover story on chefs redefining American cuisine. As the photographer snapped, I saw not just myself, but years of struggle. Nights cooking through tears, mornings waking with trembling hands, all now transformed into a confident smile. Days before the opening, an envelope arrived via regular mail. Inside was an invitation to Dylan's engagement party. Not to Natalie, but another woman. The elegant card, gold-inked, read, "The Reed family cordially invites Amelia Reed to the engagement celebration." I stared at it, then laughed. Once, I'd craved such invitations, to stand in family photos, to belong. Now, I slid it into a drawer, unbothered. I didn't need to prove anything. At the opening, a reporter asked, "Amelia, if you could say one thing to your family, what would it be?" I smiled, voice soft but firm. "Nothing. They need to own their actions. I'll keep cooking and loving my way." The room hushed, then erupted in applause. That answer wasn't an attack, it was freedom. I was no longer bound by anger. I'd learned to let go, to free my heart. Late that night, after guests left, I walked through the new kitchen. Staff cleaned, laughing softly. A shy 12-year-old girl stepped in, clutching her mom's dress. "Hi, Amelia," her mom said. "My daughter loves cooking but fears she's not good enough." I knelt to her level, smiling. "What's your name?" "Lily," she mumbled. I handed her a menu, pointing to the italicized line, "Every dish begins with courage." "Lily," I said warmly. "People told me I wasn't good enough, that dreams were foolish. But I got up, kept going. If you love the kitchen, trust that love will carry you far." Her eyes sparkled, a small smile breaking through. In that moment, I knew. My greatest victory wasn't a new restaurant or a magazine cover. It was planting belief in another's heart that they too could rise. On the rooftop garden, golden lights twinkled over vines, my heart strangely calm. I thought of Dad, Richard Reed, still grappling in debt's shadow. Of Mom, still dodging truth. Of Dylan, planning an engagement likely loveless. I no longer hated them. I didn't wait for tearful reconciliations. I chose silence, sometimes the costliest lesson for those who never valued you. A year, from an empty room to a red brick haven. A year, from an abandoned daughter to a woman standing tall in her own name. I raised a glass of wine, gazing at Boston's glowing skyline, and whispered, "This is my song of freedom." Looking back, the greatest treasure isn't applause, headlines, or new locations. It's the journey. From the daughter left in an empty room, to the woman brave enough to set boundaries, strong enough to rise, and compassionate enough not to let hate imprison her. I learned freedom starts with a no, and healing with a small act of kindness. Family can wound, but from it we learn to grow, to love ourselves, to inspire others. I share this not just for my pain and triumph, but to remind you, everyone deserves to live true, to shine their way. If this resonates, leave a comment with your thoughts. Subscribe to join me in the next stories. Our journey never stops.